All right, today we're jumping into a question that has had experts scratching their heads for, what, the better part of a decade now?
You've seen the headlines, right? They're everywhere, all predicting this massive collapse for China's economy. And honestly, when you look at the raw data, you kind of see their point.
First off, you've got this real estate crisis that just won't go away. I mean, in almost any other big economy, something like this would have already triggered a complete financial meltdown. Then there are these reports about local governments. We're talking about them being buried under, what? An estimated $1 trillion in unpaid bills? That's a debt crisis on a whole other level. And if that wasn't enough, youth unemployment has just skyrocketed to about 20%. Think about that. That's a number that would cause serious social unrest pretty much anywhere else in the world. And yet, the big collapse everyone's been waiting for, it just doesn't happen. No chain bankruptcies, no huge Lehman Brothers moment. So what is going on? What's the secret sauce here? Well, the answer is this fascinating paradox, a trade-off between control and cost. So yeah, that brings us right to the heart of what we're digging into today, the Great China Paradox. And the reason it's so resilient, the reason it hasn't collapsed, is because of what you could call its economic Great Wall. It's this massive, state-engineered defense system that's designed to absorb pretty much any shock you can throw at it. Okay, so the sources we're looking at point to 5 huge breakwaters that are protecting the economy. Let's actually break each one down and see how they really work. First up, and this one's pretty straightforward, China has a massive war chest. We're talking about the world's largest foreign currency reserves, something like $3.3 trillion. That is an incredible shield. It's what stops the kind of currency collapse that we've seen absolutely devastate other countries during past crises. Okay, second, it's not just the government's money, it's the people's money. You see, there's a lot of anxiety about paying for things like healthcare, school, and retirement because the social safety net just isn't that strong. So what happens? People save. A lot. Chinese households have one of the highest savings rates on the planet, over 30%. Now, that's actually bad for domestic consumption, but it acts as this incredible safety valve for the whole financial system. And this is where you really see China's state-run model in action. Let's do a quick comparison to Japan, right after its big bubble burst back in the 90s. In Japan, you had private banks that just stopped lending, and that caused this huge wave of bankruptcies. It was incredibly painful, for sure, but it did eventually clean out all the bad debt. China? It does the complete opposite.
Right. So instead of just letting failing companies go belly up, the government basically tells its state-owned banks to keep shoveling money at them. And this creates thousands of what economists have dubbed zombie companies. They're not really alive, but they're not dead either. And the most important thing is they keep people employed. That prevents the kind of social unrest that you'd get from massive layoffs. But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. None of these defenses are actual solutions. They're just delay tactics. And they come with these massive long-term costs that are just quietly piling up behind that economic Great Wall. So how do they keep the financial system stable? Well, it's basically through a kind of quiet, undeclared freeze on deposits. First, you have super strict controls on moving money out of the country. That's layer one. Then you combine that with the fact that all the major banks are state-owned, and now you've got the new digital yuan, which lets the government monitor every single transaction in real time. Put it all together, and you can stop a bank run before it even starts, without ever having to admit that's what you're doing. And what about that crazy 20% youth unemployment number? Well, that gets managed too. See, when migrant workers lose their city jobs, they don't just hang around. A lot of them just go back to their family homes in the countryside, and because of how their household is registered, they just vanish from the urban unemployment stats. The massive countryside kind of acts like a giant social buffer zone, just absorbing the shock. So this is really the key takeaway, right? The system isn't fixing any of the root problems, the debt, the overcapacity, any of it. As one of our sources puts it so well, these mechanisms are really just a life support system. Their only real job is to keep buying more time. Okay, so let's look at where all of this is heading. All this buying time is building up to what might be the single biggest risk in the entire system, a ticking debt bomb hidden in local government finances. You know, in most countries, we're always worried about the national debt. But in China, it's a different story. An estimated 60% of all public debt isn't held by the central government. It's sitting on the shoulders of local governments, and that is just
fundamentally unsustainable. But wait, it gets worse. That's just the official number. The sources we're looking at point out that on top of all that, there's another 14.3 trillion yuan. We're talking over 2 trillion US dollars in what they call hidden debt. This is all money that's been borrowed by thousands of shady, off-the-books investment companies that are secretly controlled by these same local governments. So, if a sudden dramatic collapse probably isn't in the cards, what's the endgame here? What actually happens when an entire economy's main skill is just buying time? Well, the analysis suggests that kicking the can down the road forever doesn't make the problem go away. All it does is change what the final outcome looks like. And it points to one of two possible futures. On one hand, you could have a Japan-style stagnation, where the economy doesn't collapse, but it just stops growing for decades. Or you could get a Soviet-style decline, a kind of slow, grinding decay where the system itself just gets tired and the state slowly loses its ability to get things done. And that really gets to the heart of it. The choice China is facing, according to this view, isn't really between collapse and recovery. It's a choice between a long, painful slump or a slow, systemic decline. Because one way or another, the bill for avoiding reform always comes due. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. Is what we're seeing in China a unique blueprint for how a state with this much control can manage a crisis, or is it something more universal? A modern-day warning for any country about the massive price you eventually pay when you decide to put off painful but essential reforms.